Harrison, and we are P1 Picks, a Formula One podcast that uses data and analytics to give you the inside line on Formula One race bets. We have just come off Lando Norris's second win at the Dutch Grand Prix by 20 seconds, which was incredible. And we're headed into Monza. How are we feeling, Harrison?
We're at Monza this weekend, arguably my favorite track. I'll throw it out there. I like Baku a lot too. Baku and Monza are the best. A lot of chaos. Highest average speed of a Formula One race, which means we have more laps than any other track. I love that. I love the layout. I feel like the really hard braking zone in turn one is awesome. Sets up a lot of awesome overtakes. Then you get turn three, you get Curva Grande, like all these just like awesome high speed corners. Um, it's a circuit that like really allows cars that have low drag to like super benefit. So I think Alpine's gonna suck. Like obviously they do well when downforce matters, like Monaco. They're not gonna do well on a track like Monza where they need a bunch of horsepower. Granted, I was actually pretty surprised by Gasly in the Dutch GP. I do think that they'll struggle and fall down the field. So yeah, I think this is just a track that that really promotes teams that can get that low down force setup right, low drag setup right, and we'll see.
Just going back to the Dutch GP last week. Tell
We
me,
did call that.
yeah, we did. I was excited, honestly. I didn't think it would ever happen. And especially after the first lap. Like, what do we think about Lando at the
I
start?
we said it. We were like, he's not gonna lead into lap one, but it doesn't matter because he's got the pace. And I think at the end of the day, like they're gonna be certain tracks where pace there's like a pendulum, right? There are tracks where pace is going to allow you to overtake the car ahead of you, like Monza, Baku, America, right? And there's going to be tracks on the opposite end of that where even if you have a huge pace advantage like Monaco, you can't necessarily overtake the car ahead of you. So I think part of understanding betting is what teams are going to qualify well and what teams are going to understand that they can set the car up in a good place for race pace because they can overtake cars. So I think having that understanding of like, hey, even if Lando struggles off the line, he's still going to win the race, right? But in Monaco, that happens, Max wins off the line, he's probably going to win that race, right? So I think understanding the track and the probability that a car can overtake is really important piece in looking at does this bet make sense, especially when we look at like the post qualifying bets.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to that point, in terms of race pace, we all saw Leclerc and Verstappen in the cool down room, and Leclerc looking utterly just like forlorn, sad. Like when he asked Max about what was the like how far behind were you, 20, 22 seconds, he was just like, oh my God. Because McLaren has gotten this right in a real way. And, we saw a few strategy hiccups going into the break. But I think coming out, I was really excited to see Lando in his first win. What do you think about Piastri last weekend and then going into this weekend as well?
Yeah, so I mean, it kind of foreshadowing what we're going to call out here, and we get to dive into these bets. But yeah, I think Piastri is strong again. I think he's obviously in the best car. I think he's someone that I should expect to be fighting Max more than he is.
Mhm.
I think I was a little bit let down from his Dutch. I mean, it seems like McLaren just never seems to get off the line well. If they can just find a way to not lose positions on the opening lap, they'll be much better. I thought he could have been a little bit more aggressive with George at the start. If I'm going to be honest, I want a little bit more of an aggressive Piastri. I mean, the only time he's made contact all season was Sainz in Miami, and that was kind of like a real racing incident. I think he needs to like Max Verstappen somebody, right? Push somebody off track, like be a dick. We need Piastri to have a little bit more shoulder, like a little bit more spike, and I think until he has that, I think he's always going to be fighting for podiums and not wins, even though he has the pace.
Piastri, podiums, not wins, feels like a definite vibe because there really is something. He is so nice and like, jovial, like super funny on Twitter, that whole thing. But at the same time, there is definitely Max Verstappen. Like, I will not budge when it comes to this corner, when it comes to this lap. Um, yeah, that's super interesting. What do you think going into Monza? What do you think about Piastri?
I like him for a top three. I think as we kind of look to talk into these bets a bit a little bit later, I mean, he's plus 100 right now to finish in the top three, and he's got the fastest car. I think it's really going to be a toss up between him and Charles for probably P3. I think we need to talk about how good Ferrari's pace was at the Dutch Grand Prix. Charles was only a tenth of a second behind Max, probably one of the closest times they've been to Max all season. They're definitely going to want to do well in front of the Tifosi, right? That is the home of Ferrari. Ferrari's like 40 miles away, so this is a very emotional race for Ferrari. I still don't think they've solved their qualifying problems. Maybe a tire warm-up issue. I still don't think they can beat McLaren in a straight fight, especially because the track is one where had Piastri had a better circuit, he probably could have overtaken Charles. I mean, he really did have the pace advantage. So you got to pick the car with the best pace going in and the highest probability for a podium. And that's our boy, Piastri. Well, maybe not our boy because we told him he needs spikes, but I like Piastri. F3 winner, F2 champion. As a rookie in both of those categories, that's a big step. Whenever you see an F2 or an F3 rookie win, that's somebody you need to take note of. The thing is, Lando never won F2.
Yeah.
It's surprising that he's this competitive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it took a while though, right? Like, think about how many times this is the first time that he qualified first and actually won the race. So, and this is only win number 2. And I feel like, that a little bit McLaren strategy? Yes. Is that in fact with McLaren's car? Absolutely yes. But this year it is like, do you think that Piastri has what it takes in the long term to overtake Lando as the number 1 driver at McLaren?
Yes.
Okay.
I think he just needs more time. I think he just needs more time to figure out how these tires work. One of my favorite quotes is Helmut Marko, and Helmut Marko says drivers need 3 years before they really acclimate to Formula One. So I think we just need to understand that he just needs another year and a half, right? Let's not judge Piastri until the start of the 2026 season. Then let's judge the hell out of him.
Yeah, let's do it. Do you want to dive into bets for this week?
Let's dive into our picks. Let's talk about why Lando is the Mando to win this week. You see what I did there? I rhymed Lando with Mando. It's genius. Anywho, this is the one number we need to think about post Dutch Grand Prix, right? Lando wins by 20 seconds. He is 6.5 tenths faster every lap after he passes Max. So that's raw pace right there, right? We roughly know that the McLaren is 6.5 tenths faster. From that, we also know that Verstappen was running the old Red Bull floor, which they think cost about 200 points of downforce or about 0.2 of a second. So we do a little bit of math here. We think 6.5 tenths was how much Lando was faster on pure pace. We think that 2.5 tenths was about how much Max was struggling. And I think this is important to note. Part of the reason that Lando was so fast was that they was on the harder tire. Part of the reason Max did so well in the beginning of the race was because he was on the medium.
Yeah.
The Red Bull does better on softer medium tires, and McLaren seems to do slightly better on the harder tire. The reason why that's important is you're primarily going to be running this race on the harder tire. You're primarily going to be not necessarily always having that new tire stint advantage, and you can really hear Max on the radio. He starts to complain like 7, 8 to 10 laps in because the tires and the Red Bull seems to work much better in qualifying over 1 lap. But there does seem to be this trend of over an entire stint length, Lando gets so much faster. So Lando is probably going to podium or probably going to win the race. Excuse me. He should start on pole. The other piece about this is even if he starts the race on pole, he will probably lose position 1 going into the lap 1. Like Max will find a way to bully him out of the road. But I also still believe that Lando will come back to win this race because this is just a track where you can really benefit from this is just a track where you can really benefit from this is a track you can really benefit from the long straight.
So Lando outright wins. That's plus 100 odds right now. If you bet 10, you could win 10. And you know what? I feel that, and I think you're right. I think that what the Dutch Grand Prix did was just really reinforce a lot of the preconceived notions we had but weren't positive about. And I think, like you said, even if Lando doesn't qualify first or loses position going into the first few laps, we have seen that McLaren time and time again track down Verstappen, and like their pace overall, race pace is just it has become a lot better. Something you mentioned though was Verstappen's floor. What does that look like going into Monza?
So it looks like they'll be updating the Verstappen floor so that he'll have one that should provide a little bit more downforce
Yeah.
and only be like 2.5. It should provide a boost of at least 2.5 tenths. So I think realistically, Red Bull should be, in best case scenario, 2 tenths, on worst case, 3 tenths behind McLaren. Potentially, that's race losing pace.
What do we think about Sergio and the Red Bull last week? Just while we put a bow on this very.
I heard a rumor that Sergio is working with Rob Wilson, who is the famous driver coach who apparently got Kimi Räikkönen back in a good place after he was struggling at Ferrari. So it seems like Sergio Perez is in a slightly better place. I've heard rumors that he was doing some sports car testing just to get back to the fundamentals.
Yeah.
It looks like he's in a better place. I mean, I think that an article about Rob Wilson helping him and stepping in and Red Bull giving him some driver coaching is something that we need to watch for, because drivers have this real tendency to overcomplicate things. But I think going back to basics and working with the coach has the ability to potentially really help them.
Do you think for the Constructors Championship, because really we have never been this close in quite a few years, do you think that Sergio and Max versus Lando and Oscar, could that become a real fight?
No, I think McLaren are going to run away with it.
Okay.
I mean, their car's in a better place. Piastri is better than Perez. I mean, Red Bull have the best driver of the four in Max, but the average between the McLaren drivers is higher. And I mean, the McLaren was 6 tenths faster in the Dutch Grand Prix. Like,
Yeah.
that's
Which,
like crushing these guys.
yeah, which leads us into our next pick, which is
Yep.
Oscar Piastri. Podiums, not wins, remember. Podiums, not wins. Plus 100 for a top 3 finish. You bet 10, you get 10. We're like really on this plus 100 train. Why is
Yeah, you come to this podcast for plus. I mean, look, everybody can call out a minus 300. Max is going to finish on the podium. Like, everybody can call that shit out.
Yeah.
What are we going to do that's going to actually going to make some people some money? It's going to be interesting. Like, Piastri, top 3 should be a lock.
Yeah.
I like his pace. I think the only reason he didn't finish on the podium is that McLaren ran a shit strategy and let Ferrari undercut him.
Yeah.
Ferrari actually need to get credit for how good their strategy was on Sunday. Like, they undercut George Russell and they kept the car ahead of Piastri. Like, it's genius.
Yeah.
Like, they did a great job. They knew, kind of similar to what we saw in Spa, that like the undercut has a ton of power this year. And if you can undercut and stay in clean air and then force the driver behind you, even in a faster car, to stay in your dirty air, the chance of you actually keeping that position is exponentially higher. So my hope here is that McLaren learned something. Like, let's keep undercutting. Like, let's undercut aggressively. If Piastri loses P2 or P3 or P4, let's undercut them aggressively on the first stop and then go long. I think that's the only way where you can kind of balance out potentially losing positions at the start, which, like, I'm very concerned about McLaren doing. But I just think you've got to be aggressive on the undercut to kind of catch back up.
Yeah, the undercut thing is what happens when everybody undercuts?
Well, I mean, I think if everybody decides to undercut, like, there's a point where you can't make that tire length last the entire stint.
Yeah.
So there is like a maximum tire length, and so there's a lap where like you can undercut. If you go more aggressive than that, you might actually run out of tire length. So, you can try it. I'm sure teams will be more aggressive, but especially look at a place like Singapore, right? A place where you can't overtake. I'm sure teams are going to be using the undercut super aggressively there.
All right, so we've got Oscar Piastri plus 100. That's a top 3 finish. What's our final bet going into qualifying this week? Oh,
I like your boy Albon. You know what? I think that a lot of people are going to underappreciate Albon because he was disqualified and we really didn't get to see how their pace was in the last race.
Yeah.
But I do think that him qualifying P8 is super strong, and I would expect him to do something similar at a track that really seems to suit the Williams. I don't necessarily think he's going to be a P7 like he was last year, but I do think that Albon could drag that car to the points. And I also think this is a circuit where Williams has probably highlighted, we think we're going to be really strong here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm a huge Albon fan, will be forever and always. We haven't even talked about Carlos going to Williams, which will just be a whole other thing. I might as well just dedicate my life to Williams at this point. My two faves. But yes, okay, so Albon. And I love this bet. It's a minus 120. So if you bet 10, you could potentially win 8. And tell me why Alex Albon and not Fernando Alonso to finish in the top 10 here.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are going to pick Alonso to finish top 10. It's just a minus 300 bet. So, like, you're going to win $3 on a $10 bet. Like, that's not interesting. Like, you come here to get good insight about what are your minus 100, what are your plus 100s. Are they all going to hit? Maybe, maybe not. Do I expect us to have an absolutely rockin' weekend? Yes. Is Albon going to finish in the points because people are underestimating how good he is and Williams will probably get it right on this one track? Yeah, I believe that for minus 120. I also believe Piastri can drag that car into the points, even though that Mercedes will probably be strong and, Ferrari will be resurgent. So we'll see. It'll be a fun race weekend.
Yeah, for sure. Let me recap what our bets are going into Monza this week. We've got Lando Norris. That is an outright win, plus 100. You bet 10, you win 10. We've got Oscar Piastri on the podium. That's also plus 100. Bet 10, win 10. Or bet 100, win 100, even more exciting. And then finally, we have Alex Albon, minus 120. That's for a top 10 finish. Bet 10, win 8. And I think those are really strong bets. Do you think we're going to learn anything in qualifying this week that will change our outlook on this race?
Who has the best low drag setup? I'm so excited to see. When we take off the wings, when you can't make downforce except through the body of the vehicle, who's the most efficient? It's going to be McLaren. Anywho, yeah, it should be fun. No, it's my favorite track, the fastest lap of the year.
Harrison, thoughts on Logan Sargent? And
Welcome to IndyCar. I mean, here's my bet. Logan Sargent will never finish in the top 10 standings of an IndyCar championship.
Okay.
I will be surprised if he podiums.
How do you think this experiment and all of this happened and why and all of that? Like,
I don't know. I mean, it's sad that Calipino got the seat because there's so many better drivers that really deserve a shot, like Hager, the Red Bull associated driver, or Paul Aaron, who's like actually leading Formula 2 right now. Or let's talk about Kimi Antonelli, who's a Mercedes driver. I mean, who's a Formula 2 driver. But like, there are just so many people that I feel like Liam Lawson that like better, Alex Palou that like better deserve an opportunity to step in the Williams. It's kind of depressing that it went to Calipino, but like, okay, James Vowles, you know what you're doing. LOL.
Why did that happen? Why?
I don't know. He hates Logan Sargent, and they probably brought a bunch of money.
Oh no, I
like
get
buy him
the
out.
Logan Sargent part. Why was this the replacement driver? I get Logan was like geez, did you see like the $1.3 million of damage he did this weekend to that car? Like, I don't think Williams could afford to have Logan Sargent continue to drive. So I get that. But like, why this replacement driver?
I mean, I just think this replacement driver was the one that was on their team. So he just like had the easy line in, and he, like I've said, he probably brought a ton of money with him.
Oh yeah, fun.
I'm sure he bought the seat, not got the seat.
Love that for us. Well, it'll be exciting. I think that's all we have on P1 picks today. Anything else?
That is it. We're excited for these 3 bets. I think Lando's going to win. I think Piastri will stand next to him. I think Albon's going to be fist pumping because he finished, I don't know, P9, P10, somewhere like that.
P9 is a win for Williams. That's great. We're going to be positive, encouraging. Well, I'm Meredith, this is Harrison, and this has been P1 Picks. Thank you for watching, listening, however you found us, and we can't wait to talk more about Monza later in the week.